me tell you a story. There's a popular kung fu story about a man who visited a Shaolin temple, and he begged the monks to teach him kung fu because he had bandits coming to their village and robbing them, and he wanted to be able to stop that raid. And so he said, if I could take kung fu for a year, when those bandits return to our village, I'm going to defend our village. So the monks led the man out to this big water trough. It was full of water, and they showed him a strike, a punch, and they told him to punch that water until there was no water left. And so he immediately started punching that water. And every time he punched it, he would send a splash out of the trough and onto the floor. And of course, there wasn't a lot of a variety that he could use in punching the water. It was pretty much just one punch, one style of punch down into that water. But each time that water level would drop, another monk would come in with a bucket full of water, and he would refill that trough again. And so it was frustrating for the man because he did this every single day for a few months. And after a few months, he kind of voiced his dissatisfaction with the training to the monks. But every time, they just simply told him to keep doing the same thing, to keep doing it. Well, he just buckled down and just kept doing it, thinking, well, maybe one day they'll finally actually teach me kung fu. So he did this for a year. This guy did. And at the end of the year, he emptied that trough, and no monk came and refilled the trough this time. And so he's like, okay, what's up? So he stormed into the room where all the monks were sitting around a table, and the table was made of stone, and they're just waiting for him. They knew that he was going to be coming. And they asked him, hey, are you satisfied with your training? Well, the guy shouted. He's like, look, in all of my time in this temple, I haven't learned a thing. I've wasted an entire year of this pointless task of punching this water. And he got really angry. And as he was shouting at these monks, he became so angry that he struck down with his one strike that he'd been practicing for a year, and he hit that stone table, and to his amazement, he split that table in half. Well, then one of the monks stepped forward, and he put his hand on the guy's shoulder, and he said this, do not fear the man who has practiced 1,000 strikes once each, but fear the man who has practiced one strike 1,000 times. So my question for you is, what do you hear in that proverb?
This is the Coaching Life Podcast. Well, I've read the whole chapter, so I have a little bit more insight. No, I think what I hear is that you know, if you want to be good at something, you have to practice it. And usually when we say we want to be good at something, we're thinking, I don't know, from a more global perspective or a more expanded perspective. You know, I want to be good at basketball. I want to be good at baseball. And it's not just sports. You know, I want to be good at public speaking. Yeah. It's anything. I want to be good at parenting. You know, we kind of think that way about everything, but usually you can break that down into some, smaller, more simple aspects and say, okay, what are the main things that, when I say I want to be a better parent, here's a short list of the things that being a better parent, when I think about being a better parent, I'm going to be better at doing these things. And you focus, you're able to focus, or, you should focus on that list of things to be better at what you want to do. And most of the time it's a lot more simple than what people think. Yeah. And even to the point that maybe they think it's too simple, and then they want to, we want to make things more complex than they have to be. And this is definitely true in sports, in baseball, and even at a smaller level in those things, in hitting, in fielding, and so forth. So, yeah, simplify your focus is what I hear in that story.
Yeah. Getting specific. If you want to get better, it's one thing to say, hey, you want to just get better every day. I want to get better at being a person, right? Well,
Yeah.
I gotta pick out some specific things. One of the ways to simplify your focus is to pick out those specific things that are aspects of being a person, right? That are being a better person, to areas in which you want to get better, and be specific. And then not just, another way that we are simplifying our focus is by creating repetition, by creating routines, by creating the just that consistency of doing the same thing again and again and again.
Yes.
One thing I remember, when I wrote this chapter in Coaching Life that's titled "Simplify Your Focus," it's chapter 7 in the book. I remember the night that I had this thought. I was watching a football game, actually. It was fall football game, and we had our first weekend of NFL football this past weekend, and so it's kind of relevant here to our conversation. And I remember it seemed to me that the two teams that were playing, one of the teams seemed like they had a huge playbook, and they were going to run every play in it that night. and they weren't being very successful. I'll just put it that way. But what struck me about the other team is I wondered. Now, they may have run a variety of the same kind of play, but boy, it seemed awfully simple. It seemed like they were running the same 2 or 3 all night long, and it couldn't be stopped. It couldn't be stopped. And so I got to thinking, on my drive home, I got to thinking to myself, is it better? I guess if I had a football coach in front of me, I would want to ask them, which team concerns you more on your schedule? Like, as you look at your schedule, there are certain teams and what they do, right? So let's say you had a team that has 100 different plays in their playbook, and they practice each one of those plays one time during the week, because that's pretty much all they could get to, right? But man, they got a big playbook. They run a lot of plays. Or what about the team that has 5 plays in their playbook? You're like, gee whiz, junior high teams have more plays than that, right? But here's the thing. They practice those five plays relentlessly every day, over and over and over again, to perfection. Every lineman knows exactly what he's doing on every play. He knows exactly where he's going. He knows exactly who he's hitting, who he's blocking. Everybody knows their role, and they run these 5 plays to perfection. Let me ask you, who would concern you more? And I wonder how many football coaches would say, obviously, it'd be the one that runs those 5 plays to perfection. We have less to stop, but it's going to be harder to stop those.
Right, exactly. More to prepare for, if you're playing a team that runs a lot of plays.
That runs a lot of plays.
For, but it would be harder to execute.
Yeah, exactly.
Stuff. I like how you mentioned, routine. I was actually going to use this in one of our 14U practices, because some of the kids that are playing on our team, they have aspirations to be, college baseball players or college athletes.
Sure.
And I saw Brian Kane tweet this the other day. I think it's a neat little story in itself. I'm going to read it. It might take longer than what it should, but I'm going to read it real quick. Yeah, basically, it's it's titled "My Ideal Monday through Friday in School Year Weekly Routine." This is an athlete's weekly routine. Okay. He's got it all scheduled out here. So 6:30 a.m. wake up, a.m. routine. So part of that, that involves getting dressed, making his bed, eat breakfast. Looks like calling a homework hotline or something like that. Yeah. 7:15 bus pickup, depart for school. 7:30 arrive at school. 8 a.m. school starts. 3:30 p.m. arrive home. 3:30 to 4 snack time, chill time. 4 to 4:30, drive to baseball. So he's driving to baseball practice here, and he says he's listening to books on tape. So from 4 to 4:30, he's listening to books. And he's got some names here of some athletes: Conor McGregor, Jerry Rice, Jorge St. Pierre, Michael Phelps. Then from 4:30 to 6:30, he says he's looking. This is his baseball strength training block. 6:30 to 7:30 is his homework block. 7:30 to 8 is when he eats dinner. 8 to 8:45 is his PM routine, which involves reading another book, calling the homework hotline, looking at an app called Way of Life. I've never heard of that. Baseball drills. It mentions baseball drills, conditioning, towel drills, hip drills, shadow, bullpen. And then from 8:45 to 9:30, it's chill time again. And then at 9:30, it's lights out.
Yes. He's
So I think there's
planning all that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's some of those things are really simple. Arrive at school at 7:30. Arrive home, right? 9:30, lights out. Some people might look at that and think, "Man, why do you even need to say that?" And I think that it kind of speaks to the idea that you have a routine and you're focusing on very simple, small tasks that group together make for a whole day. But the neat part about that schedule, the neat part about that story is, and this speaks to everyone out there that wants to become a college baseball player, a college athlete. This is the schedule of an 11-year-old.
Right.
So you've got 11-year-olds out there striving, and doing what it takes to get to the next level. If you want to know what it takes to get there, this kind of gives you a window.
Absolutely.
Because you've heard people say somebody out there is working harder than you. This is kind of a little bit of proof. You've got an 11-year-old kid
an actual
out here.
kid. Yeah, it's not a hypothetical situation here. That's an actual kid's schedule throughout the day.
And he's preparing himself, and you're going to have a schedule like that, especially if you end up, playing a college sport. You're going to be breaking it down into small pieces like that.
That's true.
I thought that was pretty neat.
It is.
Just coming across that.
And I'll tell you why you write that down, that 9:30 lights out, go to bed. You write that down because then you've planned it, and you're either going to deny it, or you're going to do it. You're either going to say, and so wherever you are at 9 o'clock, you look at your watch and you see that it's 9 o'clock, and you're thinking to yourself, I've got 30 minutes to get the lights out. Sorry, folks, I got to go, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't write that down in the morning, if you don't write that down the night before, whenever it is that you're writing in your journal, if you don't write that down, then what's going to happen is you're going to be out and it's going to be 9 o'clock, but you're going to be in the middle of something. And since you didn't have a plan, since you don't have a system in place for when you're going to go to bed, it's just going to be okay for you to just keep doing whatever it is you're doing. And before you know it, it's going to be 11 o'clock. And now it throws your entire day off the next day because you failed to plan. You failed to simplify and get specific about your focus.
Right. It stacks on top of each other, too, because if you're sitting there at 8:30 and you don't have that plan of going to bed at 9:30, you have a tendency to waste time.
Yes.
If you're focusing on something at that time, you can think, well, I've got some time to get this done, right?
Yeah.
You don't have that goal, that milestone, that task at 9:30 waiting on you that I got to get this done before 9:30. So, a lot of times, and we've talked about this before, people say, I don't have the time.
Yeah.
The difference is certain people figure out different ways to use the time that they have.
I wish I knew.
That's part of it.
Yeah. I wish I knew you were going to do that, because I actually do that. I do the same thing. I would have brought my little journal book in that I use. I've filled up 3 of them. I mean, ever since I haven't always done it, but ever since I've started doing it, I filled up 3 of them by doing this, and it's just real simple. It's like one of the first things you do. I do in the morning is I'll just tell people I wake up. When my alarm goes off. I wake up. I get up. I don't hit the snooze anymore. I just get up, and I'll go in and brush my teeth and just kind of, I don't know, it feels clean and ready to go, right? And since I'm working from home, there's not as much of a rush to get ready or anything like that. And so I'm doing this stuff a little bit later. I've rearranged my time frame of when I'm doing these things. But let's say it's 6 o'clock, well, which it is. It's 6 o'clock when I'm getting up now. And I'll go downstairs, drink a ice cold glass of water. I'll fill it up from the fridge. And I just love the way that feels when it hits your chest. You know, it's something about that cold water when it hits your chest. It like shocks everything, wakes everything up. That gets that metabolism going early. And of course, I make coffee. I love coffee, man. I drink coffee all day long. So make a big pot of coffee. And as the coffee's making, I'll sit down with that little journal book, and I will create what I call at the top of the page. I'll write the date, what today's date is, and I'll just put today's map, and I call it a map, and I start with what I've already done. So I've already, 6:00, I got up, check. I can go ahead and check that off. I won that,
Yeah.
So check that off, and then and I don't get as specific as say I drank a glass of water and all that. I just told you that just to go through the day, but so then it's now 6:15. So 6:15. Make my map, make my plan. Then here's what I'm going to do. Within the next hour. During that morning time, I want to read. I want to pray for those that I told people I'd pray for, and then it's time to get ready for the day. And then that way, as I'm looking through that list, as I'm creating my day. And I'll be honest, it gets monotonous sometimes because during the work week, a lot of times I'm doing the same things, And if you work in a factory or something like that, you are literally doing the same. You got a very similar routine, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't do this. It just means you might have a longer block of time to say, okay, I'm going to arrive at the office at 7:30, and between 7:30 and noon, it's work.
Sure,
that's what it is. Now, for me, because my work entails different things every day, I'll get a little more specific in there. I'll say I'll go ahead and write the meetings that I know I have down, and I'll tell you where this has really helped me, Pat, and maybe this can help somebody else that's listening. Is it helps me with emails, because I find that I check email way too often. And I check my phone way too often, and I look at my phone. And so what I've done is I have decided, and I've gotten away from this working from home, and the routine's all screwed up since March. But I still try to do this, so the writing down stuff down. But what I like to do is say, email 9 to 9:30, and then email 1 to 1:30, like after lunch again, and then email 4 to 4:30. And then what I found was one time the first time I did that, and I like, give myself a few times during the day, because honestly, a lot of people communicate to me through email. And so they know that. Now that we're using Teams, it makes it a little easier for them to pop in and me to get a notification. So if something's an emergency, they know they can get me. But someone emailed me one time at like 2:00, and I didn't get back to them until 4. And it wasn't an emergency. It wasn't important. But they were used to me emailing right back. Like, wow, Chris, I figured maybe you weren't in today because you usually email me right back. I said, no, I've changed some things. Here's what I've done. Because I was wasting a lot of my time immediately responding to emails that really didn't need a response right away.
Sure.
And so I was able to create, and here's the thing. I didn't create time there. I didn't make time. I didn't carve out time. I have the same amount of time. What I did was I rearranged some things in the daily schedule so that I had more time to do the other things that were more important than checking an email that really didn't need a response at the time.
Sure.
So I'm glad that you brought that up, because I really enjoy that. And I'm not really a left brain person that kind of maps everything out, a real analytical thinking type of, I don't do that really. I mean, it's for some things I do, like I map out my practice plans by the minute, as well. But in all, I don't mind being spontaneous, but there's something about that, creating a routine for yourself. It just makes, it feels good. I mean, because everything you do during the day, you've accomplished something. And it feels good to accomplish something, especially for men. We like to accomplish things, and if you could check stuff off your daily routine, it's like, I had a pretty good day today.
Yeah, I think there's an element that makes it easier to accomplish things too, because you are focused on the task at hand more. Mm-hmm. Even to your point of saying, from 7:30 to noon, I'm just going to work, and if that's your schedule, entry for 7:30 to 12. Yeah. There's still that maybe call it a subconscious focus or whatnot, but there's still that focus of what am I doing from 7:30 to 12? I'm working, and that helps you focus on that
on
task.
work, right?
Yeah,
And not
exactly.
other things.
So,
yeah,
right.
This whole simplify your focus thing actually came into real life play for me this past weekend in the baseball context. I've been helping this fall. I've been helping my brother with the Raptors 14U team in the fall league, and it was a lot of fun. We wrapped up the season this past weekend, and the kid that was pitching in the first game, I always got in the bullpen with the kid, with them and go through their routine and get them ready for the game. And we were out there, and while the catcher was taking infield and doing some things with the team, I went out with him initially, and then the catcher comes out and he finishes up the bullpen routine with him. So when I started the bullpen routine with him, and once we went through all the warm up and then he got throwing his pitches, I asked him. I said, remind me, Isaiah, how many do you throw 3 different pitches? You throw fastball, different ways, 4-seam, 2-seam, and whatnot, and then do you also have a changeup and a curveball? Because some of these kids haven't developed a good curveball yet at this age, and he said, well, I only have a fastball and a changeup, and I've been trying to practice my curveball, but it's just not very good yet. And I said, that's okay. I said, we can, and so we ended up talking about that, about how, it's fall and it's a good time to practice it in the game, and so let's just plan on you throwing it. If your goal today, if you're around 70 pitches is what the plan is for you, then let's say you throw 10 curveballs today, maybe, and everything else is faster change. But I said, here's the thing, man, honestly, your changeup needs to be your best pitch the rest of your life, because that's going to be your better off-speed pitch. And he kind of looked at me. He's like, really? I'm like, oh, absolutely. And we talked a little bit about that, but we threw it. I'm telling you what, he threw a really nice changeup in the game. I mean, he had hitters. Oh. He had hitters off on the front foot and popping balls up and swinging through balls, and it was funny because I don't think the coach realized that it was a changeup, and he was throwing it a lot. He was throwing. I mean, he'd start some kids off with it, and he was like, and you could hear the coach down there. He's a little frustrated. He's like, you got to wait on him. He doesn't throw very hard. You got to wait on him. You got to wait on him, and all that. And then Isaiah would hear that, and he'd be like, fastball, and the kid would foul it off, late and everything. And yeah, so we talked afterwards about this very issue, and because there are other kids who will say, I got 9 different pitches, I got this knuckle curve and this slider screw and this, all this. And one of the things we said was, I said, guys, Isaiah went into this game today with 2 pitches pretty much, but he threw those 2 pitches really well. And so look how successful he was,
Right.
And it doesn't take a lot of different things to be successful. It takes a focus on something that you do really well and really, really mastering that. And
sure.
It kind of is the same kind of thing that we're talking about here.
We all get lost in that, and I like in the book you write, how someone asked you to come and kind of look at their practice or give them an idea on what they should be practicing.
I remember that.
And you broke it down really simple, and they were kind of disappointed about the answer because
right.
you said, well, you should throw, you should hit, you should field, and you should run the bases.
Uh-huh.
And it was, and the response was kind of like, well, we've done that.
Right.
We've already covered that.
We want to move on to the next thing, right?
But the point that you make is, hey, if show me a good baseball team and tell me what they do well. And the off the top of your head, the things that you're going to say they're going to do well is they throw well. They field well. They hit well. They run the bases well, and you build your team from those concepts. You build your practice plan from those concepts, and work on those. Mm-hmm. And those are your non-negotiable aspects of your practices. The things that you are always going to make sure that you do. And we, as coaches, as parents, even when we're trying to make our kids better athletes or better players, we make things a little bit too complicated.
Yeah.
And if we just get better at this one thing, this little piece, it'll make us better overall. So that's a good lesson to know.
I will always say that when it comes to the game of baseball or softball, the teams that throw it and catch it the best are going to be your most successful teams. And that's really what it comes down to.
I think if I was to coach an 8U team, most of our practices would be spent. Most of the time in our practice, every practice would just be spent on variations of throwing and catching the ball.
Yep. Making it fun. Don't just stand there across from each other and throw and catch it, because, of course, they're going to get bored at 8 years old. But there are things that you can do to vary that up to do different types of throwing and catching.
And sometimes it's different ways.
Yeah, and sometimes it's throwing it, have some fun with it. Hey, we're going to try to throw them short hops now, right? And then you practice, and then hey, figure it out. How do you catch a short hop? How do you feel a short hop? But the teams that spend, if you took a 8U team, that'd be kind of an interesting experiment, wouldn't it? You took an 8U team, and you built your entire practice. Not that you didn't do any hitting at all. I mean, swing the bat.
I've got a point on that. The point that I would say is, most kids, when they're not working in practice, when they work on their game,
I know what you're
with their parents, or when they work on hitting,
they go get a tee and a net, or they go out in the yard and they hit. You're right.
Yeah. So as a coach, in my mind, these kids are going to grow into hitting regardless of what I do anyway. They're going to get a lot of reps in hitting, but what they're going to miss is the fielding and the throwing.
Yeah.
And I feel like I see that all the time. Every summer league season that comes and goes, I see teams that just, you see them out there and you can see they're horrible, they're bad, they're inexperienced, but really what it breaks down to is they just need to throw and catch.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
And I think if you did that, you would, because, people say, well, it's about hitting. It is. But that's aided because at the 8U level, it's about hitting. It's aided because it's about hitting because your teams can't play defense.
Right. That's exactly right. You need more runs. If you can't throw it and catch it, you're going to need more runs. You're right. But flip that though. Let's say you can throw it and catch it really well. Then you may have, because you're always going to have a day when you're not hitting very well. Everybody, every team, every level, you're going to have that. And so it's, but you don't have to have a day where you're not throwing it and catching it well. You don't have to have a day like that, because if that's something that you can do every day. You can do it well every day, and teams do. And ones that do on a consistent basis are your better teams. There's no doubt about it. That's a good experiment. I mean, it's not, and here's the thing, it's not an experiment. You wouldn't be like sacrificing anything on these kids. You would make them really, really good. In fact, just people don't believe that. That's the thing is no one really no one will do it. Not a single 8U coach will do it. They'll want to. They're going to get on the internet. They're going to try to find some kind of gimmicky, things to do and they're going to build their practice. They're going to be working on rundowns all the time. But here's the thing: what makes a rundown successful? Being able to throw it and catch it, right?
Yeah.
And if you throw it and catch it well, it takes one or maybe two throws, and then you tag that person out. Everything comes back to that. Everything on defense comes back to throwing it and catching it, and it's a good point. The training center that I'm starting to do some lessons with kids at, someone asked me if I would do hitting as well. Mm-hmm. And I've said that I actually just really want to focus on helping kids with pitching. Not that I don't have the ability to do hitting. I don't necessarily I'm not devoting the time to do both, but I made it intentional to just work on pitching, because one of the things I said to someone was like, listen, hitting coaches are a dime a dozen today. I mean, kids are always working on their hitting, and they can do that on their own, really. I mean, and I really feel like it's more important. The biggest deficiencies I see in young people's games come in defensively today, and particularly in pitching, really. And I know that there's a lot of pitching workouts out there. There's a lot of pitching gurus. There are a lot of things, but a lot of them are just teaching velocity. Just to be really honest, it's throwing programs is what it is. And I'm not against throwing programs, and I'm not against velocity. But what I'm for is kids learning how to hold runners, kids learning how to control the running game, kids having an understanding of what's going on during the game and what pitch should be thrown when, and thinking for themselves. Kids understanding as a pitcher how to get outs, right? I mean, how to really get outs and how to attack in certain situations, and and just quite frankly, how to really throw strikes. I mean, how to learn how to do that. And at the same time, we'll work on putting your body in a situation in the proper mechanic and technique to where you're going to get everything you can out of your body so you can throw hard. But there are so many deficiencies I see in pitching and defense today that I said I would rather just simplify my focus on training and just do pitching because of that very thing right there. Because it's also hard for a kid to do that on his own. It's easier to practice hitting on your own. It's harder to practice pitching on your own unless you got someone who's willing to just go out and catch with you and do that, which I had a good dad that did that, and I did that with my own kids. I know you do that with yours as well.
Well, it does seem like, too, there's more, like you said, there's more resources out there for hitting than pitching. And, I would say, too, that pitching is a thing that it's difficult to practice correctly, I would say. And there's multiple schools of thought that go into pitching too. So definitely from a mechanical perspective,
right?
And it's hard. The resources that are out there a lot of times, and I know this is true for hitting too, but it just seems like there's a big contrast in certain ways that different people teach, pitching.
Yeah,
more so than hitting. I think you can look at a major league hitter. And maybe you can spot check me on this and tell me what if this is true. You look at a major league hitter, and a certain part of a major league swing looks the same, through all of them.
I agree with that.
But from a pitching perspective, that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of that has to do with a person's body makeup as well, and understanding the biomechanics of what your body doesn't do well versus what this guy's body does well.
Yeah.
You're long and lanky. It's going to look a lot different than a guy that's short and pudgy, but they could both be really great pitchers. You just got to understand what it is that they need to do to get the best ability out of them.
Sure.
Go back to the T-ball 8U thing one time. I said something in that chapter, didn't I, about someone might actually say, if you tell them you need to work on throwing it really well, catching it really well, fielding it really well, they might say, well, those are things that we learned in T-ball.
Yes, you do mention that.
So, the thought is that actually might be a good way to develop your practice plans, regardless of what level you're in. Right?
Yeah.
Think about
not your T-ball or 8U practice, but your 12U, your high school practice.
Yeah, you coach in a high school team tonight, an 18U team or whatever, or a 14U team. Think about what if this was the first week of T-ball practice, what would we do? That might be what you need to focus a lot of attention on, even in your older kids' practice, because we tend to lose focus on those things as they get older. And as they get older, they're going to need to be able to do those things a lot better if they're going to be competitive.
Absolutely.
And just keep it. It doesn't have to be complicated. Yeah. I mean,
the truth of the matter is that at a youth level, and even in travel ball, this is true because we've talked about this too. That a lot of travel ball organizations or teams they don't really have a huge opportunity to get together and practice a lot. Mm-hmm. They're just not able to do it. One of the reasons is because they're always playing games, and
that's true.
In fear of burnout, that they want to go rest on days that they're not playing games. But at 12U or in a recreational league and in travel ball, you have a limited time to practice as just naturally. So you want to spend that time practicing on the very basic fundamentals of the game that you have to be good at, to be successful.
Yeah. If you're looking at an hour and a half, you better put the fundamentals in there.
Yeah, or 3 hours a week.
Uh-huh.
That might be the most that you get to practice with your team.
Yeah, scheduling field time and things like that. Right.
Yeah, right. That makes it tough. As a coach, but at the same time, it kind of makes it easy too, because you're limited on what you have time to work on. Yeah. Focus on the big things.
Yeah. Right.
or I should say the small things.
Hey, you know what? The small things are the big things.
Yeah, that's a good call.
That's another chapter, isn't
it? Yes.
It sure is. The little things are big. chapter 8, the very next chapter after this one. When Brock's age group of baseball players were 10 years old, we took a trip to Cincinnati and played in a tournament. And while we were there, we wanted to go to the Reds facility, the Hall of Fame. They had just built the Hall of Fame museum back then, and we knew the curator at the Hall of Fame museum. The guy that managed it is an Athens High School graduate, and so we knew him, and he was going to get us a tour of the museum and then also a tour of Great American Ballpark, because the Reds were off that day, and so they weren't playing. So we wanted to go to a game, but they were off. So we went, and it actually was a lot of fun to get the tour, because it was, they'd been to plenty of major league games, but they hadn't all been out on the field, down in the dugout and things like that. Well, I'll tell you something that was really cool about that experience. Jerry Hairston Jr. was on the team back then. Remember Jerry Hairston Jr.?
No.
Yeah, fast, decent player. I mean,
okay.
But he was there, and he was working out. And so when we went down through the clubhouse and down, and we were in the dugout, and the kids were like everybody was, parents were taking pictures of their kids in the dugout and all this. And while we were doing the dugout thing, Jerry Hairston Jr. was there with one of the coaches, I'm assuming, or a personal trainer or somebody. And what he was doing was running bases. He was practicing running bases, and I didn't realize it at first. We just kind of we were watching him, like he was at first base getting his lead, and then he was just he'd practice his jump over and over and over again, practice his jump, and then he would like go ahead and take off for second base, and after 2 or 3 steps, you would see him work on like lifting his head and looking over toward the coach at third base box, so that he wouldn't, and what was the route he was going to take to second base so that he wouldn't have to slow down as he rounded that bag if there was a ball hit to right field. And he did that again and again and again. And finally, when I realized what he was doing, I pulled a couple of kids aside. I said, do you guys see what he's doing? This is a major league baseball player, someone who's getting paid to play the game, a guy that's been through every level of play that you guys are wanting to go through. And we've been down here for 45 minutes, and he was here when we got here, and he'll be here when we leave, and all he's doing is practicing running the bases. That's all he's doing. It's just rounding bags. What's the quickest way for me to get from point A to point B on this baseball diamond, and I want to make sure that I do this really well. And I found that really fascinating, that again, that's what people who are at the highest levels of anything do. They do the simplest things over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's a good point. You write about in the Simplify Your Focus chapter about Bryce Harper, showing up at the park at 2 p.m. and getting a full workout in, right? Whoa, wait a second, on game day.
Weight training, yeah.
Yeah. So, he does that, but then too, takes ground balls, make sure he gets his swings in and things like that. I mean, he's practicing on game day. And I don't think that's something that we talk about enough from a major league perspective, is how much those guys actually dedicate, to their craft.
The little things are the big things. Let me ask you a question. Let's bring this home to all of our listeners here. Because they might not all be coaches, and they might not, this might not be relevant to them as a coach, but as a person it is. So I'm going to ask you a personal question.
All right.
At what task is Pat Martin an expert?
I'm not for sure I have one.
Oh man, you are.
No.
What do you really do well?
This is good stuff, because one of the great things I thought reading the coaching life is the coachable moments that you have after every chapter. I thought that was a really neat little spin that you added to the book. And it honestly, it makes it a little bit of a challenging read, because you got to do a little bit of work as you read. You just can't,
if you want to, right? Yeah.
Sure. And, but that's one of the good things. That's one of the questions that you ask.
Did you answer it? Have you already answered it?
Oh, I didn't write it in a book. I'm sure I answered it when I went through. I don't remember what my answer was when I went through it, but I don't know. What am I an expert at? Failing. No, I would say
you're not answering for Baker Mayfield today. You're answering for Pat Martin.
Oh my God. I'm pretty loyal. I can tell you that. I'm expert level loyal.
No doubt.
When it comes to the Cleveland Browns. No, I would say, when you look at my professional life, I'm, my role, my title is, it just changed. Application systems analyst. That's what it is now. But, it deals with, software applications, computer applications. And I'm pretty good at that. I've spent a long time learning different types of applications, and I kind of have a good understanding for, how they work. And so I'm, if I'm an expert at anything, it's probably that.
Because it's become second nature to you, right? Now a lot of that's second nature to you because you've done it so much.
Yeah, and even when learning a new application and one that I've never looked at, I'm able to, lean on my experience to, not only to say, well, this is probably how this works, but it just makes, there's a framework there that makes it easier to learn something else. So.
Yeah. See, I think the point here is I think that this is a question that every single person can answer. I really believe it. Everyone is an expert at something. It might be eating potato chips, and that's something you don't want to be an expert at. But we're all experts at something, right? And I think that what we need to do is ponder that and then ask ourselves, how did we get there? Because the reality is the same way that we got there, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing that you're an expert in, the training it took for you to get there, the tasks or the routines it took for you to get there,
failure.
It's the same thing for something that you want to be an expert in, which is, I think, the second question we all need to ask ourselves. We need to ask ourselves, what are you an expert in? But then we need to follow that up. After we ponder the whole route, the whole journey to get there, we need to follow that up with, now think of something that you would like to be an expert in, something that you're not currently an expert in at the moment, but you really want to do this particular thing well. Because again, that's a question that I believe every single person has an answer to. If not, you're not living. You're not living. You need to. If you don't have an answer to that question, you don't have something in your life right now that's not in your life that you want to be an expert in, that you want to be really good at, then maybe you should pause this and think about it for a minute and come up with something and write it down and then come back for the conclusion of this podcast. Because, man, that's what life's about.
Yeah.
Wanting to get better, and add things to your life that enrich you.
I think, yeah. I mean, I think there's a sad reality out there that not a lot of people feel this way. And, I feel like certain people get to a certain point in their life and they feel like they've learned all they wanted to learn, or they've accomplished all that they've wanted to accomplish. That the idea of striving and continuing to grow is tiresome to them. They don't want to do it anymore. And that's unfortunate.
It is. Or maybe they're just not thinking about it in a broader sense of things that, like if you're retired, you're not done. If you're
As a matter
old,
of fact, that's one of the bigger mistakes that you make at a retirement age, because if you do any research on that, retirement's not a healthy decision typically. Because you're
exactly
what are you
right.
doing? What are you doing? Really, when you retire, you're stopping your daily routine is what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you're not replacing it with anything.
You got to replace it with something. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I think about this in context of my own parents, right? I mean, and my mom's, she works at all kinds of things, and she's quite frankly an expert at a lot of things. But my dad, I'm telling you right now, he's become and this, you might hear this and go, well, does that really count? Of course it counts. You know what he's become an expert at? Camping. They never owned a camper before he retired, but they bought a camper, and he loves it, man. He knows how to use that. They're on their second one now. I mean, they don't have two campers, but they upgraded, and so it's something that he really enjoys it, and he he reads about it. He wants to get better at, he wants to find out the best spots and the best ways and there's a whole bunch of things, and they really enjoy it. It's part of their life, and he just does. And I tell you something that really, this is, I'll give him a little better answer here. He's an expert at helping people, at serving people and helping people. He really is. He's always been that way. And so now with having more time, because he's retired, he's just gotten phenomenal at it. He's there for anybody that wants it, that needs help, and he's willing to, and he knows a little bit about everything. And so he can do that. And I think that regardless of what it is that might be your answer to that question, have an answer. I mean, just have an answer, right? And then work at, and then figure out what it's going to take to become that expert in whatever it is that your answer is.
Yeah, and I think this kind of goes back to the one word challenge, and you kind of encapsulate everything that you, or something, a focus that you want to become an expert in when you decide on that one word at the beginning of every year. And we talked about it. Your word was significance, and mine was discipline. Mm-hmm. And I'm not doing very good at that right now. I'll admit at that. I need to step it up. But
we've become challenged in all of I would say everybody in the world has become challenged in whatever commitment they made back at the beginning of the year, because we got thrown a big curveball and things changed. Yep. And we were forced to change our routines, and we were forced to change a lot of things that caused us to change our outlook and our attitudes and our worldview, and people become angrier. Have you noticed that? I've noticed it in myself. People have become angrier in the past few months. And that's a sad thing to me. It's a sad thing, because we can't change our circumstance, regardless of how much we think we can. We can't change our circumstance, but we can control our response to our circumstances. And I've seen a lot of responses in myself, and I see it in a lot of people that are just angry response. Anything that happens, I'm just angry, just moaning about everything right now. And I want to stop that in myself, and I want to encourage other people to choose a better way, because the only way you're going to change the environment around you is to help weed out that negativity. And it starts with each one of us. It starts with me. If it's going to be weeded out, it's got to start with me. I think it was Charles Wesley, the preacher, a historical preacher. He was preaching a revival, and he said, "Lord, I want you to revive everything in this circle." And he drew a circle on the ground, and he stepped in it himself. And it's because the whole point of it is, if I'm praying for revival, if I want something to change, it has to start with me.
That's good stuff. Yeah, that's for sure. I would say too, there's an element of being an expert in the dedication that you have to growing and to learning. And you mentioned your dad being an expert at camping, and he might say, well, does it count? But if he's committing himself to learning more and and to enjoying it and knowing everything he can know about that, then I would say that's exactly what he is. And the third question of your chapter is what can you do basically to help yourself accomplish the goal that you're setting, to accomplish becoming an expert in what you want to become an expert in. And you ask it in the way of, what are you going to carve? What are you going to take out of your life to make room, to focus and to dedicate on those things. And, that kind of sums up, the entire episode here, talking about, the Shaylin legend and the schedule of the 11-year-old and the way that you document your day and schedule out your day. You have to make decisions on what are you going to sacrifice in order to get to where you want to be. And for a lot of us, that sacrifice is kind of just lazy time. A lot of times, if you're not already dedicating a portion of your day to scheduling or focusing on something to get better at, you probably are wasting a little bit of time. Or if you find yourself saying, I don't really have the time to do anything.
Yeah,
you probably have more time than what
you'll
think,
find out when you sit down and start writing it down.
Yes.
What you're planning to do the day, or sit down tonight and write down everything you did. Try to go back through your day. Start with what time you woke up, or no. Start with what time you planned to wake up.
Yeah.
The first time your alarm went off, and then go from there. And you might find that you had more time in your day than you realized, right? I mean, you might find that.
Because a half an hour is a lot of time, right?
Sure is.
A half an hour is a ton of time.
It's an entire
every day
Netflix episode of Cobra Kai.
Have you been watching Cobra Kai?
Oh, man. Yeah, we've been wasting some time watching that. No,
we did.
No, we planned that in. My wife and I we'll take one show that we'd like to watch, and we just kind of relax, and we'll watch it at the end of our day or something. And Cobra Kai has been the one that we.
I've heard a lot of people talking about Cobra Kai. They love it.
Yeah, it's because we love Karate Kid, man. We grew up with that. Yeah, it's the same people in it too.
I know.
Yeah,
I know. It's good stuff. My kids started watching it the other day, and I peeked in on a little bit.
Oh, there you go. You got a family activity. See, guys, we're not all down to business. We have some recreation time ourselves as well. In fact,
the idea.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. No.
Well, I was going to say the idea. You weren't going to bring up the Browns there, were you?
I was going to say, in fact.
Oh my goodness.
Pat and I have a recreational activity planned for this week, which could make next week's podcast really interesting, because his Browns are playing the Bengals this Thursday night on primetime television. We're planning on sitting down and watching this game together. Pat, diehard Browns fan, and of course, Joe Burrow, the leader of the phenomenal 2-minute drill yesterday that just got poo-pooed at the end of the game. But both teams coming off a loss. Could be a pretty exciting divisional game here.
Maybe we should schedule Lucas for next week.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, because I'm not necessarily a Bengals fan, but we're all Joe guys. But Lucas is a big Bengals fan, and
yeah.
I don't know if you want to do that, Pat. He could wear you out next week.
Well, I don't know that. I'm not for sure we're all that far apart in our opinions at this stage. So
okay, yeah,
it may not be that bad anyway. But anyways, to get back to what's important, the third question here, you look at, you ask the question, what are you an expert at? And you talked about all the time spent and all the things that you did and all the experiences and all the failure and, everything that you put into becoming an expert in whatever task it is. And then what you want to do is you want to carve out the time to be able to repeat that journey and that experience with, the thing that you want to be better at, that you want to be an expert in. And in order to do that, you have to figure out how to manage your schedule. You have to be able to plan, and you have to be disciplined to the plan. So it's possible. We've got 11-year-olds doing it, right?
We do.
So everyone can do it.
Yeah, it's real life. People, don't roll your eyes at that when you hear that, because it is. I mean, remember Nathan Rourke when we had Nathan in? We talked about if you're gonna add things into your life that you don't currently do in order to get better, it's going to require you to sacrifice things that you do that aren't making you better. And his big answer to the question that we asked about what put you in the place that you are, as a Division I quarterback, at the top of your game, he said it was sacrifice. There were things that I didn't do in high school that everybody else was doing, and that's everybody who's read up, everybody's getting to know Joe Burrow a lot better now. That's every story you hear about him. That's what you hear. That's what you know. I mean, we saw that. I mean, this was a different type of person all throughout elementary school and middle school and high school. Just a different type of person, different way of going about things, and we're not all going to make it to that same level that he's at right now. But
every level requires it.
Exact. Yeah. That's exactly right. It's whatever level it is that you make it to, it's going to require that, and you just never know. You could be the next person to make it to that kind of level in whatever field it is that you want to do.
Yeah, it was surreal watching Joe Burrow in a Bengals uniform yesterday.
It was.
taking snaps. The camera focusing on his face and seeing that kid from Athens in that Bengals helmet. It was, that's coming from a guy that really didn't know him all that well. You knew him a lot, better than I did, but I know where he came from. And
oh yeah, it was like I texted you yesterday when it first came on, the broadcast first came on, and they opened up with him. I was like, man, I wasn't expecting the chills to run down my spine like they did. And you get tears and it well up in your eyes. It's kind of a weird feeling, It's a pretty cool thing.
But it's just a story of an individual that was committed and dedicated and sacrificed and continued to work, and he's still working, one goal after another he's accomplishing. And I know the national championship is gone now, and he's thinking about bigger and better goals. I can guarantee that.
Guarantee what he's thinking about today. The goal of today.
Yeah, I do too.
How he's going to run away from Myles Garrett when Bobby Hart can't block him.
Shoot. I hope that's the case, but I don't know. That's a tough position for me.
Yeah.
I want Joe to do well, but man,
that's your team.
I'm loyal, right?
Yeah.
I'm loyal.
That Bengals are playing the Cowboys this year, but I got to say I'm not as loyal as you.
The Browns play
I'm
the
rooting
Cowboys
for the Bengals.
Too.
Oh, this year they do?
We should probably get together for that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Actually, I think it's week 4.
Really? I didn't even notice that. I had my eyes zeroed in on that because we were going to go. Our plan was to go. There's no way that's going to happen now.
Nah. Yeah. Well, I don't know what
they're going to let 9,000 people in. That's going to be family members only, pretty much,
or executives.
Yeah, people paying the money to be.
Someone more important than us.
Yeah. All right.
Find out what you want to be an expert in. Yeah. Find something you want to be an expert in. Schedule the time to do it.
That's it.
That's the cast today.
Yeah. Your takeaway from today might just be start writing stuff down. We say that a lot, have a little notebook in the dugout, write stuff down, because it's going to help you to go back later when it's more important to coach things up later, not in the heat of the moment, not in the emotion of the moment. Again, write stuff. You might not be a person that writes stuff down. Well, I don't care if you are or not. Start doing it and see what happens.
Yeah.
Just see what happens. Yeah. Write down what your day is going to look like. Write down what your day looked like, and you'll learn a lot about yourself. You really will.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good talk, Coach.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.